My 35F husband's 34M dedication to Freemasonry is destroying our marriage and his life. How do I get this across to him? Hi there, long-time reader but a first-time poster. The long and short is that for about 6 years now my husband has been a Freemason and I've always supported him on this. My grandfather was a Freemason, so it's not really new to me or anything, and I don't believe in any of the conspiracy crap you find online, but I'm starting to think it may not be the best for him. My grandpa always used to say it went family, work, masonry, but in my husband's case it's more masonry, 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 then family, then work. Then masonry again. He attends lodge nearly every night. For context, my grandpa would go a couple times a month, and yet he's only a fellow craft, so not a part of the add-on things like the Scottish Rite or Shriners or anything. I genuinely don't know how he has the stamina for it, because I'm a part of an improv theater club and frankly every other week is enough. Sometimes he's gone for hours, other times an hour or even less. When I ask him what he's doing he gets defensive and says he can't tell me because he has to maintain secrecy. I knew full well there'd be some lessons and ceremonies I wouldn't exactly be getting a front row seat for, but I don't think it's that unfair. I ask what he could be possibly doing that occupies him practically daily. Hell, some days when he comes back early, he goes to his man cave due to more work for them. Apparently he's volunteered to do admin work for his Grand Lodge, but like, when does it end? He doesn't get paid for any of this and he spends so much on dues to actually do this. I've even tried to get involved via the OES, something I've always wanted to be a part of, but he point blank shut it down and said that we can only look into that when he becomes a master mason, which is apparently still years away. And it's not even just our marriage it's affecting. Some weeks he's out so late with his lodge buddies. He doesn't take care of himself. There's been times he hasn't worn clean clothes or shaved, and plenty of times he's gone into work without showering. Sometimes he doesn't even go into work and just calls in hours late to say he's been called for urgent lodge business. His boss is too good to him and lets it slide because he's genuinely blown away. My husband's in the Masons and thinks these meetings must be dead important. Like, I get a lot of these guys are going to be retired, but Jesus Christ, surely they have to know how it works. It's making a bad impression with people, and I genuinely can't remember the last time we did a thing together as a couple. Plus our bedroom has been dead for at least a year, which I've sort of put up with because I have a low libido, but I guess it's just another symptom. Every time I ask him to do anything he just tells me he's too tired. I guess, how do I get it across to him? His Masonic life needs to slow down. It's not even affecting just me, it's affecting our whole lives, but I don't even know where to begin. I don't want him to leave the Masons, just maybe calm it down a little so we have our lives back. How can I get this across to him without seeming that I'm jealous of the secrets or I want to worsen the wedge between us? By the way, I did actually email the WM his lodge to just say I'm kind of worried for him, but I've not heard back yet, and if they're all this active, not sure how much help he'll be. Thanks for any advice. Edit. WM just emailed me, apologized for taking his time, and explained my husband has not been a member of that lodge for at least 5 years, having left just under a year after he joined. Apparently he had difficulties with the leadership and had been repeatedly cautioned for soliciting the other lodge members. He told me checked with other lodges in the area and none of them have any record of him switching, so it seems he demeet entirely. Update December 4th, 2024. Hi everyone, you might remember this post where I mentioned how Freemasonry, or rather my husband's commitment to it, was destroying our marriage and corroding his life. Well, I apologized to the craft because Masonry had nothing to do with my husband's antics in my update to the post. I mentioned I had spoken with the current worshipful master, basically the lodge's chair, and he informed me my husband had demeet from that lodge years ago and never joined any others. He did suggest it could be a clandestine lodge, and in a way I hoped this would be the case, but I think we both knew that was highly unlikely. He also ended up putting me through to a past master who was senior warden of the lodge around the time my husband quit, and apparently it was a jumped before he was pushed situation. I did mention my husband was in trouble for soliciting his brothers, but the WM couldn't tell me anymore. The PM vaguely remembered it, and while it seems no one was exactly sure what he was soliciting them about, it was described as invasive and strange behavior. Me and the PM, David, might as well use names, had a good long chat before he offered to join me in discussing this with my husband, Kevin, with the hope being we could get through to him and steer him off whatever course he was on. Sadly, I don't have good news. David came round on Monday and we talked a lot beforehand. Kevin was out, of course. Most of our chat was just him being generally supportive, but he did start asking questions that were definitely leading into the clandestine lodge route, though he dropped that as a theory when the lack of self-care became evident midway through our conversation. Kevin comes home, and when he comes in I say there's somebody I'd like him to meet, and he just deflects by saying he's tired from lodge and will have to do it tomorrow. David introduces himself anyway, explicitly as a PM. Kevin ignores him but then goes through to the kitchen, pours himself a glass of milk and starts scrolling through his phone at the kitchen table. We went through and sat down at the table too, so without a word he got up and went into the living room, so we followed him there where David said we know he's not attending lodge because he was the senior warden when my husband left. Kevin does this weird laugh and says so it's a crime to move lodges then? David says no other lodge in the area took him on, and Kevin goes a little bit red before saying that's because he switched to PHA and then sort of insinuates David is racist for taking issue with that. David says he spoke to all the PHA lodges in the area too and he's good friends with a lot of their members, so he knows he's lying again. Kevin just says look, he's tired, he's not doing this, but I told him we know something's up and well, the majority of you thought it was drugs, so I just said look, is it drugs? He said no, but finally admitted yes there was something up and asked if he could show us something, just he needed to go to his car. David said that's fine, we'll come with him. Well, I guess in Kevin's defense he did need to go to his car. In the trunk he got out this black sports bag and I dunno what I was expecting, but I don't think anything could have prepared me for what he showed us was inside. When we got back into the house, he got out this near lifelike latex horse mask and other leather and latex fetish gear. Full suit with harnesses and everything. If you were expecting anything to happen, there wasn't anything. We kind of just stared in total silence. Eventually Kevin restarted the conversation by explaining he was into a BDSM fetish called pony play and that he went down the rabbit hole a long time ago. I won't really go into the full details, but long and short is he's clearly been dealing with homosexual feelings and submissive desires for a long time, though he's still in denial about both of them and is adamant he's not bi or gay, 100% straight, etc. Obviously he's at least and most probably bi, but he wouldn't hear it anyway. He explained when he was really struggling with these feelings, the urge, as he calls it, that's when he joined Freemasonry because he hoped it would prove a distraction, help improve, etc., and then sort of implied being around old men would put him off. Guys, I could tell David was a bit offended, but he didn't say anything. But yeah, apparently this is what the soliciting was about. Obviously joining the Masons didn't make these feelings go away, so he said he initially started trying to see if any of them felt those feelings too, but no one would bite. Apparently midway through he discovered the pony play rabbit hole on a BDSM website and was utterly hooked. This is when his soliciting went from, hey, I'm having these feelings towards guys, this is totally normal right brother, to, hey, are you looking to buy a pony brother? He claimed he didn't leave because he was being disciplined but because of how goddamn prudish everyone was. Yeah, apparently he was already deep into the hole, and while he'd be attending lodge a couple times a month legitimately, the other times were him doing the BDSM stuff. Apparently it began with escorts, but eventually he graduated to pro-doms because too many of them found it weird or weren't into it enough. There's one main one he goes to the most, called Mistress Candy, but when she's busy he'll go to other ones, and if that's not an option, he'll go find a cheap hotel to self-care, or do it with an online mistress. Oh, there's a lot of them apparently, and that was how he got into findoms, where the whole thing is he gives them money for nothing in return. I don't really know how to describe how I felt as this all came out: the shock, the betrayal, the rage, the upset, the hurt. I suppose I feel quite numb now, but none of it could have prepared me for what he did next. David said, so you've been having an affair then, and using the craft as cover. Kevin got very angry and said he's not been having an affair. This sparked an argument again. Won't go into the details, where Kevin's excuse was that at no point was he in control during this, because Mistress Candy made use of hypnosis to control him, and sometimes the urge was so powerful it would shift him into Sparkles, his pony persona. Involuntarily he didn't use this as an example, but I guess it's kind of like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde situation again. No remorse or contrition, and he said we can still fix this with couples therapy because apparently I wasn't satisfying his needs. How did he come to that conclusion? Well, I never independently suggested pony play and give him an avenue to open up about it. This is somehow my fault. I won't go into the arguments that followed, but it ended with me packing a bag and David taking me to my parents' place. I've told Kevin I'll be seeking a divorce, something which he's also in denial about, because the marriage is dead. Clearly he values his time playing dress up as a horse more than he does me as a person, so I might as well let him focus on that. I'm staying with my parents right now and taking some time off work until I can clear my head. Can't sleep, so figured I might as well try and get this out of my system. It has helped honestly. I'm also currently no contact with Kevin, and it'll be staying that way until I can serve him papers. Who knows what the future holds there, but he won't be in it. Though if you wanted some good news, I'm finally joining the OES. David explained to me I can join via my grandfather, so I'm going to be meeting with the secretary next week. Thanks for being on this wild ride and helping me see reason. I guess I would probably have got here anyway when the WM messaged me, but it was nice to know I had people on here. And especially those who talked it through with me in DMs. You guys know who you are and you were awesome. Otherwise, have a great day and peace out. Stories number 2. I think my husband 38M is starting to resent our daughter 4F, how do I deal with this? I'm posting this on a throwaway account because my husband knows my account and I feel bad about bringing our problems to the internet, but I don't have anyone else I can turn to about this without things getting worse. I don't even know where to start with this. For some context, my husband and I 42F have been together for nearly 16 years and married for 10. We met while he was passing by the city I lived in at the time for work-related reasons, and after keeping in touch over the phone for a long while and multiple hints and signs from my end, he confessed his love for me, and we've been together since he moved in with me after 3 years and settled in well. My family loves him, and he managed to land a good job as a high school history teacher for a school nearby. Our entire relationship, he has been very loving and nurturing, always taking my feelings into consideration and going far out of his way to keep the both of us happy. He is incredibly sweet and a huge sweetheart, and even after being with him for 16 years my love for him hasn't faltered at all. With that being said, it's a big reason why his recent behavior has completely blindsided me and I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. We had our first child, who I'll call D, for now almost 5 years ago. My pregnancy was incredibly smooth and easygoing, and all throughout my husband was even more gentle and loving towards me, and it made me feel incredibly lucky to be starting a family with him. There were some complications with the birth, but overall, it was a very wonderful experience and the both of us were overjoyed to finally have our daughter. For the first month or so my husband was stubbornly persistent that I let him do all the heavy lifting and to only focus solely on myself and D. During this time he took up nearly all the house chores, with my parents and sister stopping by often to help out with D and the other chores, and made sure to spend time with D whenever I needed a break once we both started going to work again. He called my parents during his lunch break to make sure everything was going okay. During D's later infancy and in her early baby years he laid back a little bit more and stopped checking in as much, but by no means did he give her less attention. However, over time I noticed that he was gradually spending less and less time with D and seemed to be focusing on his work more. I love D with all of my heart, and I am so incredibly grateful and happy she is in our lives, but I would be lying if I said she was an easy baby. She is incredibly stubborn and lively for her age. So when me and my husband aren't scrambling to make sure she doesn't get herself hurt or do something she isn't supposed to, we're busy calming her down from a tantrum, and it can be a little taxing. More so, I've begun to notice how much it seems to be wearing down on my husband nowadays. He is less motivated or energetic than he used to be. He is still sweet to me, but he's beginning to pull away from me and D, and our life in the bedroom is completely dead at this point. Despite this, the most upsetting thing I've noticed recently is how distant he's become with D. The other day she was excitedly trying to tell him during breakfast about this show she had been watching, and he just put his cereal in the fridge and walked away. The look on D's face after she asked me why he was ignoring her completely shattered my heart. Another problem we've been having recently is how little he's doing to help with D. Every morning I wake up early to get her dressed and fed for the day before driving her to school and then picking her up later that day. I take her to every doctor appointment, every dentist visit, every playdate and every event at her school. It feels like the only time my husband is around D is after she gets home from school and makes everyone food. This has caused many arguments between the two of us, where I'm asking him why he doesn't put any effort into his relationship with D and he gets defensive but never really gives me an answer. What compelled me to post here was an argument we had earlier this week right as I was ready to walk out the door to get D to the babysitter since no one would be home to take care of her. I honestly can't remember how it started, but I know it started as something small that escalated quickly. Many hurtful words were exchanged. And I'll be the first to admit that many of the things I told him were out of line. He started going on a rant about how much he did for our family and how hard this was on him. To which I interrupted him and asked how it was so hard for him when I was the one doing everything related to D. He just snapped at me that if it weren't for her things wouldn't be this hard. The both of us went quiet after he said that, and I probably would have torn him a new one if it weren't for the fact I was so shocked. And he suddenly decided he needed to go on a walk to clear his head. This all feels like a complete shock to me, as I'd been under the impression that my husband was happy and just going through a rough time. Yet after that comment I haven't stopped rethinking about every aspect of our relationship. After D I feel heartbroken and numb. And I have no idea where to go from here. Me and my husband have hardly been talking to each other since the fight, and honestly, I have no idea what I'd even say. At this point it's starting to drain me, and although I love him very much, if he doesn't start getting his act together, I'm not sure I'll be able to handle it much longer. What can I do about this? I can't imagine my future without him, and I don't want to divorce him, but I'm tired and stressed out and trying not to cry myself to sleep tonight thinking about it. TLDR. Me and my husband have been going through a rough patch recently because of him pulling away after the birth of our daughter and after he admitted he thought life would be easier if we'd never had D. I'm starting to rethink and freak out over what this means for our marriage. Update, 2 days later. A lot has happened since I last posted and, in all honesty, I don't know where to begin, though I guess I should start with telling me and my husband are going to go to couples counseling and I'm very optimistic of things going back to the way they were before everything started to boil over. I want to take a moment to thank everyone who commented and helped me understand what he and I are going through and how to navigate it. Someone even recommended an episode from this podcast that helped me a lot. I didn't expect this to get so much attention, but either way I am very grateful for everyone who left helpful and insightful advice for me. That being said, this update is going to be very long, so buckle up. When I originally posted, the argument that sparked my posting about this happened almost a whole week before, though now it has been a little over since we had the argument. The day after I posted, I decided to look into therapy and counseling for me and my husband, as well as play therapists for D, as some people suggested her being so dysfunctional wasn't normal and she might be going through something as well, either related or unrelated to the behavior of my husband and I spent all day making up a list of what I needed/wanted to bring up during our talk that I planned to have later that day. I was kind of obsessing over what I wanted to say and how to say it, as many of you guys suggested to be gentle with my wording and encourage honesty and transparency. D was sick, so she didn't go to school, and I alternated between focusing on preparing for the talk and making sure she was okay and taken care of while my husband was at work. I was in the middle of getting some medicine for my daughter around 12:30 p.m. when my husband called me. I answered and he asked me how my day was going and if there was anything I needed him to do after he got off work or when he got back home. I was a little surprised by him calling, since he hasn't called me on his lunch break for a checkup in a long while, and I could have been crazy, but it sounded like he'd just been done crying because he sounded a little raspy and quiet. Me and him talked for all his lunch break. I didn't bring anything up since I just wanted to have a conversation with him and wanted to save the actual talk until we were in person. Until eventually he had to go and hung up. I'll be honest, it made me really worried, since although he used to do this all the time before D, like I said, he hasn't done it in a while, and I was overthinking about why he would have called me. I think Dee realized I was troubled because of her father, because when I came back, she asked me who I was talking to and I told her who. She asked me in a very quiet and sad voice if I was sad because Papa was ignoring me as well. Now I'm a very resilient woman, especially when it's come to putting on a brave face for my daughter. But after she said that, I felt so distraught and guilty from how aware she is of the situation and how she thinks of her relationship with her father that I started crying, which in turn made her cry as well. While we were hugging, I made sure to reassure her that her father will always love her and he's just having a bad time. To which she told me how she didn't want him to be having a bad time. I took the chance to ask her if she was having a bad time, and she admitted to me she was sad because she thought Papa didn't love her and she wanted him to be happy again. We both cuddled on her bed and eventually I fell asleep comforting her. I woke up later that day and by that time the sun had already set. Dee was still sleeping and I could hear my husband watching something in our room. I got up and after making sure Dee was properly tucked in, I headed into our room, and once my husband noticed me, he paused the show he was watching and asked me how I slept. I told him I slept fine and asked him how his day went, and he said fine as well. I decided to join him in bed and he offered me a pillow for my back before unpausing the TV. It was awkward. It was clear there was something he wanted to tell me and I needed to talk to him, but neither of us knew how to start the conversation. Eventually at some point he laid his head down on my lap and I started stroking his hair. He had his arm under my legs and we both sat in silence for a while as we watched TV. Eventually I decided that we needed to talk, and I wasn't going to delay it any longer, so I paused the TV, and I asked him if we could talk. He seemed really hesitant and kind of tensed, but he said sure, so I took a deep breath and tried to remember everything I'd written down on the list earlier. I started off by saying how I'd noticed him withdrawing and being distant for a few years now, and after our argument a week ago I was starting to get really worried. I didn't try to sugarcoat it. I wasn't being hostile or accusative, but I made sure to be very clear that Dee and I were starting to be affected by his behavior and under no circumstances could this go on. I was tearing up a little bit and at some point he flipped around in my lap and was hugging my stomach. As I kept talking I went on a bit of a rant about how tired I was. And I felt like he wasn't doing enough to help and how I was worried about him. I did bring up a few of your guys' points and mentioned how he was acting towards Dee was negligent and he was setting her up for a whole life of pain if he didn't stop. I didn't feel good about saying it, but I needed him to understand the gravity of his situation. At this point I could tell he started crying because his breathing started to hiccup and I could feel my shirt starting to get wet where his face was, not to mention he was trembling as he held me tighter. My husband is and has always been a very emotional man, though typically he doesn't cry a lot. And seeing him cry so silently while shaking so hard was making me really nervous and worried, and I practically begged him to talk to me. He just kept clinging on to me for a long moment, and I thought he wasn't going to answer me before he told me with a very choked up voice how sorry he was. He sat up and explained how he'd never wanted to hurt me or Dee, but everything's been so hard on him recently he had no idea what to do about it and just started clamming up. I asked him to elaborate, but he just got really choked up and seemed to be struggling to get his words out. I was worried he was going to shut down and pull away, and in the moment, I admitted I had posted on here to get some advice and I thought he should look through some of you guys' comments to understand a little better. He agreed and I gave him my phone and I rubbed his back as he read through here. After reading for a while he gave me back my phone, and even though he tried to keep himself together it was clear he was barely holding it together. I told him that I wasn't going to interrupt him, and I wanted him to be honest with me about what was going on. And after I said that, he completely broke down. He talked for a very long time, and he was all over the place, so I'm going to try my best to explain everything he did in chronological order here to avoid confusion. As I mentioned in the original post, me and my husband met a while back while he was visiting my city before he eventually moved in with me while we were dating. Something that's relevant now that I hadn't mentioned previously is that my husband is from a different country and migrated to the US about 2 years before we met. He told me how back at home his dad wasn't really there, and he could count on his hand the number of conversations the two had together that lasted more than 10 minutes. His mother was always very stressed out and didn't seem to like him or his siblings very much. And the fact he's always been very sensitive and was never into what other kids his age liked. He had a very poor relationship with most of his brothers. The only person of his family who is still alive and he talks to is his younger sister, though due to reasons he asked me to keep private their relationship is very strained. Me and my husband are different in many ways. I'm more outgoing, outdoorsy, and confident, while he tends to be more quiet, nerdy, and in some aspects a little insecure. Because of this our social circles hardly interlap and, as a commenter has made me realize recently, I regretfully knew close to nothing about my husband's group of friends or who he hangs out with besides me. Well, as it turns out, he doesn't. He told me how at the beginning he met 2 guys at a bar who he became friends with. He told me briefly of them early on in our relationship, but he didn't talk about them a whole lot, and I admit I never bothered to ask. He told me how they were always planting ideas in his mind that I was holding him down, and that dating an older woman when he was still so young and should have been experimenting was something he was going to regret in the future when he was old and no one wanted him anymore. He defended me and told them to stop talking about me like that. He admitted he kept hanging out with them because they were his only friends, and when they weren't badmouthing me they were really fun. Well, after he got a job and got married they stopped talking to him as much. And when they did finally talk and meet up again, they showed up with a female friend of theirs and told him to have fun one last time before he tied himself down. He got into a huge fight with them that almost got physical had it not been for the girl stepping in to break them up, and my husband came home in a horrible mood. I remember that day a little, though when I'd asked him why he was so mad he just said he got into an argument with someone at the grocery store and that's why he was upset. Even at the time I didn't believe him, but I didn't press him further since he was practically hiding himself away in our bed and clearly didn't want to talk. He told me how since then he's been having an impossible time trying to make new friends, and even though he's gotten used to how distant people are in America compared to his home country, he still feels incredibly lonely and isolated. And for nearly 16 years he's been trying to make up all the social interaction he's been craving through his one work friend or ignoring it and putting all his attention and time into me, so he felt less lonely. When Dee was born, he put every last drop of effort into me and her, hardly stopping to relax, since any time he did he was just reminded of the giant hole in his life. Through sobs he admitted there had been many times he'd been tempted to drink or hurt himself just to forget about it, but never went through because he wanted to stay strong for his family and knew there was a history of alcoholism in his family and couldn't bear the thought of losing himself to it. He explained how after putting so much focus onto his life he completely crashed and just felt tired and lost all the time. And with how much Dee started to act out and how taxing it was to take care of her, he started thinking back to what his old friends had told him and wondered if this is what they'd been talking about. He was practically stumbling over himself, apologizing to me for letting them get to his head and letting himself blame and resent Dee and I for everything wrong in his life. At this point he was having a hard time breathing and was hugging me so tightly I thought my spine would snap. It was so painful seeing him trying to keep his sobs quiet to avoid waking Dee up, despite the fact he was clearly spiraling, that I had to interrupt him. I know I said I wouldn't, but this is different, so he could calm down, because at that point he was going down a rabbit hole of guilt and regret and just apologizing over and over again. There's a lot more he told me about the state of his mental health at the moment, but just thinking about it makes me tear up, and I know I shouldn't, but I've been beating myself up for not noticing so much sooner how he felt. I can't help but think how horrible of a wife and partner I have to be not to notice he's been drowning this whole time. And I didn't even think to ask him about his life or friends or anything. It was the longest talk we've had in the entirety of our relationship, and by the end of it we were both crying and holding each other. I made sure he knew how much Dee and I loved him and appreciated everything he's done for us. And I told him how I'd be by his side every step of the way, and I would make sure he got the help he needed. It was the first time we'd snuggled so closely like we did that night in a while, and miraculously he didn't toss or turn at all that night. I stayed up as long as I could, kissing his face and rubbing his back and making sure he felt loved. Even long after he fell asleep. The next day I asked him if he could call out of work for the day so we could just focus on each other, and made sure that everything we wanted to say was said, and he agreed. We spent the day bowling, eating at the local cafe, going to an ice cream shop, and then going home to make dinner together and have another talk about next steps. We've agreed to start marriage counseling and also get him into individual therapy to see what's going on and to make sure he can recover from all the bad feelings and thoughts he's been having. Many people in the original post theorized he might be depressed. And after everything he's told me, I'm almost 100% sure that's the problem. We both picked Dee up from school and asked if she wanted to go play at the park, and she was very happy to. I let my husband take the lead and watched as the two played on the playground and chased each other in the grass. I hadn't seen him that happy and energized in a very long time, and it made my heart swell. On the car ride home he sat in the back seat with her and played I Spy out the car window until Dee told me very excitedly how she was so happy Papa loved her again. I could practically hear my husband's heart shatter from the driver's seat, and he was quiet for a very long time before he just hugged her and didn't say a word. The rest of the car ride home Dee had a very guilty expression on her face seeing my husband get so sad, and I think my husband noticed because when we got home, he quickly excused himself to the bedroom for a second before coming back out almost as happy as he had been in the park and trying to make Dee feel better. The rest of the day went smoothly, and as I was getting ready in the bathroom to go to bed, I heard my husband in the next room over telling Dee how much he loved her and how he never hated her and never wanted her to think so. I could hear them reading a bedtime story while I waited in bed, and eventually my husband came into our room and got in bed with me. We talked a little bit more, and I told him how proud I was of him for how far he's come and all he's managed to survive, before kissing him and getting him to cuddle me again, which took no convincing from my end. As I'm writing this I'm lying in bed, and he's fallen asleep against my chest while snoring very loudly. I don't think I'm going to be able to get any sleep myself today, lol. We made plans to go on a weekend getaway this week. Dee's going to stay with her cousins for the time being, which she is very excited about since they have a pool. And she loves to swim. I am forever grateful to everyone who decided to leave a comment and who helped me out through this, as I can only see our love growing stronger after this. My only regret is not having caught up years before this all happened. But there's nothing I can do about the past, and I'm going to just focus on repairing and rebuilding our marriage. My husband told me to tell you all. He says thank you for all the concern and for also slapping some sense into him about his behavior. And he made a joke about just taking our problems to Reddit every time instead of paying so much for counseling sessions. This is going to be the only update unless our house blows up or something, so thank you to everyone who took the time out of their day to read and listen to my story, and if you're going through something similar, I heavily advise you sit down with your significant other and get down to the root of the problem. Trust me, it will do wonders for your relationship. Edit: I forgot to add this in, but he explained the reason he walked away when Dee was having a conversation with him was because he'd been really overwhelmed that day and felt like he was going to pass out, and, in all honesty, she was starting to get on his nerves. He apologized to her about it and promised to never do it again. Dee was very sweet and understanding with him, and I am very proud of both of them. TLDR: me and my husband were going through a rough patch recently because of him pulling away after the birth of our daughter, and after he admitted he thought life would be easier if we'd never had our daughter. However, after a long emotional talk and a day to be truly honest with each other, I'm confident our marriage will stay strong. And our daughter will live a happy life. Stories number 3. Am I the asshole for arguing with my wife over her preferring to sleep with a body pillow over me? So my wife gave birth 8 months ago. During her pregnancy she was having trouble sleeping, so I bought her a pregnancy body pillow that was a lot more comfortable for her. However, even after giving birth she prefers sleeping with the body pillow rather than me. She just says she's used to it and finds it more comfortable to sleep with. Maybe I'm just being dramatic, but it feels like she just doesn't want to sleep with me. I'm often sleeping near the edge of the bed using a separate blanket, and I just feel a lot more lonely. I brought all this up with her and she told me that I'm being more of a baby than our newborn, with all this, and to just deal with it. This led to a big fight where we were both yelling at each other. I don't think either of us said anything particularly hurtful, but it's not the norm in our relationship to raise our voices like we did and argue for as long as we did. Outside of this, our relationship is more or less fine. I mean, I obviously still love her and I'm sure she still loves me. Basically, am I the asshole for starting an argument over something like this? This is the pillow I bought. Removed link. Since people think I'm trying to sell the pillows, lol. I think some people have misunderstood what I meant as body pillow. The one she has is more like 2 body pillows plus a regular pillow. Some people seem to think that I'm jealous of the pillow. This isn't the case. I don't think she loves a pillow more than me. I just would prefer we sleep together and not with a pillow between us. 2. I didn't think this was relevant, but just so you guys know, we have a nanny that takes care of the child from Sunday through Thursday. We both take turns on Friday and Saturday nights when we have to, so it's not like I'm expecting her to do everything. Also, I am not asking her to cuddle with me all night or let me spoon her or vice versa. I just would like it if there wasn't a pillow between us. 4. Clarifying that the body pillow she has isn't just one long pillow shaped like a L. Check out the imager link, it's more N-shaped. Update. So a bit of a weird update since my wife actually saw this thread through her coworker. To clarify, the coworker didn't know that it was about my wife, she was just sharing an interesting thread. She texted me asking if I was looking to buy a new bed and I said yes without thinking much of it. She then linked me this thread and said we would talk later that night, not in a bad way. We sat down and she apologized for calling me a baby and I apologized for starting a fight over something so small. She said that she really enjoys the pillow but we can get rid of it and sleep together instead. I told her this isn't necessary and that I would deal with it, but she insisted. I've ordered her a new body pillow that just covers one side of her that she could put on the opposite side of me, so hopefully everyone can be comfortable. Everything worked out and we have been sleeping together for the past couple weeks and now the new body pillow came in and is on the opposite side of her. She switches between me and the pillow every now and then and it's not a big deal, a lot more comfortable to sleep now too, haha. Thanks to everyone who PM'd me giving me advice as well as those giving advice in the comments. I tried to emphasize this as much as I could in the comments, but seriously, my wife and I never fight and this was extremely out of the norm for us. Everything is good now though and we are going to start doing date nights again on Saturday and it's been going well. Feels more like our relationship when it was just starting out in the honeymoon period kinda thing. But yeah, everything's fine now. To be honest, it was always fine. This was just a minor thing that somehow got blown out of proportion. I barely remember, but I think we were both just stressed with work that day, so we ended up getting into a silly fight. Seriously, I love my wife, so hopefully no judgment by you guys on the one comment she said back then. She's honestly a really good person. I made an update thread a few weeks back but was a few days early for the minimum and someone commented on the old thread a few days ago, so I remembered to repost the update thread today with a few more updates. Thanks everyone. Edit. If you want to know which pillow it is, just send me a PM and I will send you a link. Just don't want to advertise anything in the thread. Stories number 4. Am I the asshole for refusing to share my special recipe with my cousin who wants to use it for her business? So here's the deal. I 18F have this amazing dessert recipe that I came up with after months of experimenting in the kitchen. It's a unique twist on a classic treat, and everyone who tries it says it's incredible. My family always asks me to make it for gatherings, and honestly, I take a lot of pride in how much people love it. Recently, my cousin, Jess, 24F, started a small baking business from home. She's been doing pretty well, and I'm happy for her. Last week, at a family dinner, Jess pulled me aside and asked if I'd give her my dessert recipe so she could add it to her menu. I was flattered at first, but then I told her I wasn't comfortable sharing it because it's really personal to me. It's my thing, you know. Jess didn't take that well. She said I was being selfish and that it's not like I'm starting a business or anything, so why would I hoard the recipe? She even got my aunt, her mom, involved, who called me later and said I should support family and not be so stingy. I explained that I wasn't trying to be mean, but I worked really hard to create that recipe, and it's something I'm proud of. Now half my family is calling me petty, and the other half is staying out of it. Jess posted a vague rant on Facebook about people gatekeeping creativity, and how it's impossible to get ahead with unsupportive people. My mom says I should just give her the recipe to keep the peace, but I don't think I'm in the wrong here. So, am I the asshole? Stories number 5. Am I the asshole for going off on my son's teacher and reporting her after finding out she humiliated him in front of his class? I 32F am a single mom to my 9-year-old son, Ben. Ben's been in a wheelchair since he was 5 due to a condition he was born with. He's the sweetest, most resilient kid I know, but I know being in a chair makes him feel different sometimes, especially at school. Last week, Ben came home looking upset. He wouldn't talk at first, but after a while, he told me what happened. Apparently, during class, the teacher, Ms. T, was having the kids line up for an activity. Ben's wheelchair got stuck on the carpet, so he wasn't in line right away. Ms. T, in front of everyone, said something like, "Oh, look. VIP Ben is waiting for his special escort." The whole class laughed when Ben tried to explain about the carpet. She cut him off and said, "Excuses, excuses." He told me he wanted to cry but didn't want anyone to see, so he just stayed quiet. I was furious. I called the school that night and asked for a meeting with Ms. T and the principal. The next morning, I went and I tried to stay calm, but when Ms. T brushed it off as just a joke and said, "Kids need to toughen up," I lost it. I told her what she did was cruel. And she had no right to humiliate my son like that. She didn't even apologize. She just smirked and said, "Some parents are way too sensitive these days." At that point, I told the principal I was filing a formal complaint and would be contacting the school board. I wasn't going to let someone like her keep treating kids like that. Well, since then, Ms. T has been put on leave, and apparently, a lot of other parents are mad at me. Some have said I'm ruining her career over a harmless joke and that I overreacted. One mom even said kids need to learn how to handle teasing. Ben's glad I stood up for him, and honestly, I don't regret it, but the backlash from other parents has me wondering if I took it too far. Am I the asshole here? Stories number 6. Am I the asshole here for leaving my boyfriend behind when I found out he planned to have a traditional family? Throwaway. For context, I 23F left the country 2 years ago just after college graduation. I also broke up with my ex 24M because I didn't want to do long distance and our beliefs didn't align anymore. We both come from the same culture and dated throughout college, but while I wanted to move abroad and study further, considering the safety of women in my home country, his plans were that he would stay and take care of his family. We were both the eldest children of the family. Neither of us was technically willing to adjust. However, what made me dump him was that he just turned into a different person in the last months of the relationship. He wanted me to act like a traditional woman if we were to have a proper family. He would constantly say things like, "Women have been historically adjusting for their loved ones," and "Can you say every single woman was unhappy about it?" and "Why are you so selfish? Does our future not matter to you? Do you trust me enough to take care of you?" And what not. Heck, he even got his mom and sister to call me and tell me if I was ready for them to talk to my parents about marriage. Luckily my dad handled it because rejecting matches, especially if the couple dated beforehand, would cause a scandal in my community. It felt like I was the one who had to sacrifice my happiness at the first place because of tradition. I also didn't grow up in a conservative family like him, and my parents told me to get the hell out of the relationship. I broke up with him, and our friend groups were merged, but everyone decided not to take sides. So there was no drama. I have been single for the last 2 years and have traveled a lot, and I plan to get residency after a few years here. This was the first time I went back home after 2 years because my cousin just had a kid. I did not intend to see or call my ex, but I met up with my college friends. And most of them, including my ex, live in my hometown, so I knew, to see all my friends I had to see him. It was so awkward, but we were both silent and just nodded at each other, and I thought that would be it. But one of his friends started talking about his fiancée, and he is a bit of an asshole, so he said, "OP, I'm so glad you left him ex behind because you didn't want to be happy in our traditional families, and now another will get to experience the real meaning of family, joint Indian family." I just laughed it off awkwardly and a couple of people shushed him. My close friends were very embarrassed and promised that both my ex and that guy would not be invited again. But my ex left me a text. He got a second number on how his friend was just defending him because I was flaunting my new life when I obviously wanted my ex to be hurt by it, that I dumped him for just a better degree. I told him this was why I left you, and blocked him. The thing is, I have been guilty about it for the last 2 years, and while I know I did the right thing for my career, maybe I should have tried not to hurt his feelings in such a direct way. I feel horrible for his fiancée, as both of them know he doesn't love her arranged match, and I feel had I had a better approach, maybe another person wouldn't have added to the mix. I feel like I was a heartless person, as my ex says, in dumping as I did, just because of our different beliefs. Am I the asshole here? Update. I wasn't going to do an update. I just wanted to ask the internet, stupid place to go, I know, but I needed a neutral opinion because people around me either hate my ex or hate me. I am still at my parents', and I told my dad what happened in a gathering. He chalked it up to my ex being jealous and insecure, and he told me not to interfere and feel sorry for his fiancée, because if she is marrying him, then she must know what she's getting into. After blocking my ex a couple of days ago, I actually managed to have the courage enough to ask him through a mutual friend to meet me again. I didn't go alone, and our mutual friend was there the entire time, in case there would be a shouting match or a scene. We never had any closure. After I broke up with him I just left, and even though I told him why I was breaking up with him, I never addressed all our problems. And when I fell out of love and how he started to feel like a suffocating presence because of his judgment towards my life choices, we met at our friend's house and he apologized for his friend and he said his friend was just being protective. I said I didn't care, and that I was sorry if I hurt him so badly that even after getting engaged he was mad at me. I know many people may call me a doormat for saying sorry, but I did it for my peace of mind. I don't want to keep any regrets, not from my side. My ex did not scream, but he looked agitated and spoke for a while and I listened. His main problem was not with me dumping him, but the fact that I have always flaunted I was out of his league. For context, my family is technically well off, and my family has mostly liberal people, so not only are children in my family not taught that much gendered roles, most relatives including my parents never approve of their kids marrying into a religious family. How that made me flaunt anything, I still didn't get. To sum it up, my ex said that I made him feel like he was never good enough for me to marry him. I certainly didn't love him enough or I'd compromise. And he has only felt inadequate our entire relationship because I acted like I was too good for his joint family where wives and mothers are still expected to wake up at the ass crack of dawn because women. He also said that his fiancée will always respect his mom. I have never disrespected his mom, and his mother said, ultramodern women don't make good wives. He also told me he felt like I keep on flaunting a picture-perfect life abroad and he felt awful because he lost me because he was not born as privileged as I was and he was stuck here. I didn't feel like I needed to explain anything more to him. After he was done speaking it was okay. Honestly, it's kind of relieving that he is a bit of a red pill idiot and that I hadn't caused actual damage to a genuinely good person. The only part that stung was when he said I had a picture-perfect life abroad because I don't have that. It's a new country, a new culture and a new language, and while the quality of life may be more and I have my good days, that doesn't mean I don't struggle. I miss my language, my home and my parents a lot. Just because you post selfies of places doesn't mean life is all sunshine and roses, unlike what social media thinks. It was relieving. Ultimately I don't think I even know what closure actually means, and technically I'm doing good in life. All things considered I will be okay, mostly. Thank you guys. Stories number 7. My daughter overheard something upsetting at her friend's house. When my daughter got home from her friend's house, she immediately ran up the stairs to her room and closed the door. That was a clear signal to me that something was bothering her, so I went upstairs to find out what it was. Rosa? I gently knocked on the door. Are you okay? I'm fine, she replied, but she didn't sound convincing. I opened the door and stepped into the room and found her sitting on her bed with her back against the wall and a pillow clutched in her arms. You're not fine, I said, walking across the room to sit on the edge of her bed. Why don't you tell me what's going on? Nothing's going on, she insisted. I know you, and this is not nothing. I gestured at her. This is what you do when you're pouting about something. She stared at me for a moment. I could tell from the look in her eyes that she was contemplating whether she should tell me or not. You know you can talk to me. I reached out and put my hand on her leg. I overheard Jasmine and her mom talking about something. I was glad she decided to tell me. What were they talking about? It took her a moment to get up the courage to reply. They were talking about how they were going to kill Jasmine's dad. Do they know you heard them? I asked. I don't think so, she replied. Maybe you misunderstood them, I suggested. Rosa scoffed at that idea. I seriously doubt that. What are you going to do about it? I don't know, she shrugged. What do you think I should do? I think you should forget you heard anything. My response shocked Rosa. Are you serious? She asked. I am, I replied. If everything you've told me about how he treats Jasmine and her mother is true, I'd say he deserves it. It still seems wrong, she pouted. Don't you think they'd be much better off without him? Probably, she agreed, but why do they have to kill him? Why can't her mom just divorce him? Getting divorced might not stop him from going after them, I explained. In fact, it might make him worse. Rosa remained silent after that. Do me a favor and just think about what I said before you do anything. You owe that to Jasmine and her mom. I got up and started to leave the room. You'll see that I'm right, I added before shutting her bedroom door. After I left Rosa's room, I went to my room and called Jasmine's mom. We are going to have to postpone your husband's surprise party, I said to her, using the code we'd agreed upon. Why? She asked. Rosa overheard you and Jasmine talking about it. She's upset, but I think I can bring her around to our way of thinking. It's just going to take me a couple of days. Stories number 8. Am I the asshole here for telling my boyfriend that his son either needs to go back to living at his mom's, otherwise I need to move out? Edit again, please stop telling me to get an abortion. I can't emotionally handle doing that. ETA, myself and neither of my children have been in contact with the son for 2+ months. CPS decided not to open a case. They told me there was no need to remove the kids from the house. I did not agree with that and wanted separation anyway. Son did go back to live with his mom, and now on the days he is around I make sure that we are nowhere near them. And dad and son will stay with grandma. This is a temporary solution until I get my housing situation figured out. I did what I could do to get them away from the son as fast as I could, and now here we are. I am backing my children 100%, and coming up with an exit plan. Thank you all for the comments. I 26F have been dating my boyfriend 26M for 25 years. We each have a child from previous relationship. My daughter is 8, his son is also 8, and we just had a daughter together 10 months ago. We moved in together right before our daughter was born normally. Our schedules with our older kids are completely opposite. He has his son on the weekends and I have my daughter on the weekdays. Right after we moved in, he told me his son was coming to live with us during the week instead. Long story short, his son ended up doing some really inappropriate things to my daughter. She has autism and is declared legally disabled by the state. So she is a pretty vulnerable child. On multiple different occasions she did tell me she tried to say no to what he was asking her to do, but eventually she felt pressured to say yes. There were times he did things without asking and has cursed at her for not doing what he asked her to do. I won't go into detail about what the acts were, but for some context it started with extremely inappropriate photos of both kids. This was when my daughter told me she did not want to do that, but he was begging her to, so she finally said yes because he would not take no for an answer. The other stuff that happened was not as awful as that, but still was extremely inappropriate and disgusting. CPS was called a couple different times, once by me and my therapist, once by my child's therapist. They did some investigating, decided not to open a case. If anyone is wondering why he would do this to my daughter, we have no idea. He has not been in any troubling situations at either home. Nothing like this has happened to him. Everyone is really just unsure of where this came from. The behaviors towards my daughter did not stop no matter how much therapy he did or how many talks we had with him, and this was going on even when we were all in the same vicinity. They were never out of our eyesight. After I found out about the first instance, however, boyfriend was working and I had all 3 kids alone for weeks. It's very hard with a newborn to get up and chase them down when they run off and I'm in the middle of a feed, or God forbid I have to get up to use the bathroom. Now I am at the point where I can't even look at him the same, and I don't want my daughter to be subjected to this or potentially have my younger daughter be subjected to this either. I essentially gave my boyfriend an ultimatum and told him that his son needed to go back to living with his mom during the week when I had my daughter. Otherwise I was going to have to move out in order to get away from this behavior so my daughter didn't have to keep dealing with this shit. He got pretty angry at me and told me that this isn't all on his son and that my daughter is to blame too because she participated. That was not his response when I first told him about what I had discovered. He felt awful and did apologize to my daughter for what his son did. His angry response was after I kept bringing it up and telling him how uncomfortable his son made me. We fought about this for weeks because my daughter did nothing wrong and she is the victim here. I know that asking him to give up time with his son is an asshole thing to ask, because obviously that's his kid and wants to spend time with him, but I also no longer want anything to do with it and want to protect my daughters and myself. Am I the asshole here? Am I overreacting by giving him this ultimatum? I am adding to this by saying myself and both of my daughters have not had contact with his son in 2 months, as I have been avoiding home when my boyfriend has him. I am trying to leave but not financially able to yet. I'm posting here because my original post got taken down on the Am I the Asshole Here thread. I did edit this as there were a lot of questions that I wanted to clear up and add more context before posting again. Stories number 9. Entitled Parents Try to Scam a Babysitter, Gets Served by a British Legend. This isn't my story, but it happened to my friend Emily, and it's too good not to share. Emily works as a babysitter and had been contacted by a couple who needed her to watch their 2 kids. They seemed nice enough during the initial conversation, but things quickly got sketchy when they started talking about payment. Entitled Dad ED, so, we were thinking you could watch the kids for a couple of hours on Saturday. Emily, sure, my rate is $15 an hour, does that work for you? Entitled Mom laughs nervously, oh, we assumed you wouldn't mind doing it as a favor, you know, like for the experience. Emily, no, I don't work for free, this is my job. Oh, come on, we're only asking for a couple of hours. Think of it as helping out a neighbor. At this point, Emily was done. She firmly told them she doesn't work for free and suggested they find someone else if they weren't willing to pay. She packed up her things to leave, but these two weren't done yet. They actually followed her out of their house, continuing to badger her about how selfish she was for not caring about their kids, and that's when the hero of this story arrived. Walking down the sidewalk was none other than the British guy from my last post. I kid you not, this man must be on a crusade to end entitlement everywhere. He stopped, assessed the situation, and asked, everything all right here? Before Emily could respond, turned to him and said, this babysitter doesn't care about kids. She's refusing to help us unless we pay her an outrageous fee. British guy raises an eyebrow, oh, is that right? So, you're expecting her to work for free, are you? It's not work. It's babysitting. Anyone can do it. British guy claps his hands together, asterisk, brilliant, then why don't you watch your own bloody kids, you wanker faces McDog cunts. Emily told me it was like time froze. The parents looked absolutely stunned. Stammered something about calling the police. On what grounds, who knows. But the British guy just shrugged and said, go on, then I'm sure they'll love to hear how you tried to con a babysitter. They turned bright red, muttered something under their breath, and stormed back into their house. British guy gave Emily a nod and walked off like an absolute legend. Emily, of course, now tells everyone this story, and honestly, I think this guy deserves his own sitcom. TLDR, entitled parents tried to scam a babysitter into working for free, only to get roasted by the same British guy who destroyed a Karen on a train. Wankerfaces McDog cunts strikes again. Stories number 10. Prude kept calling my kids girls. Several years ago, I was in line at the grocery store with my two small children, 4M and 2M. Both of them had gorgeous curly long hair that would have given Shirley Temple a run for her money. The lady in front of us in the line kept commenting on how beautiful my girls were. I thanked her for the compliments. And that there's nothing wrong with girls, but my kids were AMAB, she exclaimed loudly, they're just too pretty to be boys. They must be girls. I responded at the same level with, well, they both had penises when I birthed them, so for now they're boys, and boys can be pretty, too. As soon as the P word left my mouth, her eyes got huge and jaw dropped to the floor, and she turned away, obviously disgusted with me. My boys are now 10 and 8 and they still identify as boys. If that ever changes, I will of course support them, but why correct a mother on her children's genitalia? That's just weird. Edit. I have been in a lot of pain and was just distracting myself scrolling and thought this would be a funny story to add. I did not refer to them as AMAB to the lady in line. They were born boys. I didn't want anyone to think I was assigning genders before they decided themselves, and I phrased it wrong also. I don't scream penis at every person that calls my boys girls. I realize how androgynous children are, and generally smiled, thanked, said, they're boys, but boys can be pretty, too. They'd laugh or say, oh, I didn't realize. Cute boys. Or something along those lines, and we'd all move on. This was a one-time incident out of what feels like billions, and the only time I have said penis loudly and clearly enough for several people around us could hear, after I had politely thanked her twice and she still insisted, loudly, that they had to be girls. Maybe I chose the wrong flair. Stories number 11. Would I be the asshole for ghosting my ex-wife? I know you're gonna say it's fake and that you saw this Hallmark Christmas movie, and I'm right there with you. Honestly, I wouldn't believe it either if it didn't happen to me. So, if you can't believe it, then just pretend and give me advice anyway like I'm a real person, because I am. I 32M met Sarah 30F in grade school in our small town. She was my first everything, girlfriend, love, and eventually wife. We both went to college together, and after I graduated, we got married when I was 23, and she was 21. Sarah was still finishing her degree, and I worked hard to support both of us while she completed her studies. When she got her first job, I was so proud of her. It felt like all our sacrifices and hard work were paying off, and I thought we were on our way to building a life together. For 2 years, everything seemed fine, or at least, I thought so. Then one day, I came home from work and found her packing a bag. She sat me down and told me she had been having an affair with a coworker. I was completely oblivious. She was crying and apologetic. She said she loved me but she was in love with the coworker and they had this chemistry and a deep connection and that she never felt this level of excitement and attachment with me. At the same time, she seemed to be really apologetic and acted very guilty. She moved in with the coworker that night. Sarah made the divorce as quick and easy as possible. She didn't contest anything and took almost nothing. In the state we lived in, you can get a divorce in 10 days if there aren't any children involved. We filed the papers ourselves, no lawyer couldn't afford one. After it was final, she asked if we could be friends, and I'm ashamed to say that I just broke down and sobbed like a baby in front of her, said nothing, and left at that point. She was 23, and I was 25. A couple of years later, in early 2020, while riding out COVID in my hometown, my mom casually mentioned that Sarah had married the guy she left me for. Apparently, Sarah's parents and mine had talked about it since they're longtime friends, and Sarah's parents were hesitant about the marriage but supported her. Hearing that stung. I had done everything I could to move on, but knowing she had married her affair partner felt like reopening the wound. I told my mom, as kindly as I could, that I didn't want to hear about Sarah anymore. She understood and never brought her up again. I was broken and depressed at first, but I went to see a therapist and got on some meds. I got some certifications and, through a friend from college, I got an interview with a global consulting company. My friend was married and couldn't do the amount of travel that the job required. So he pushed hard for me for the position. I started traveling around the world and pretty much worked all the time. At first, on any given day, I was either in the gym, working, or having a virtual therapy session at 3 a.m. I was a dull boy. I got into incredible shape thanks to lifting and running. Eventually, I got a long-term project in Romania and was able to meet and have relationships with women. Fast forward a few years. Recently, I had a few weeks of vacation saved up, and I wanted to spend Christmas in Reykjavik, Iceland. I went to my parents' place in my hometown for Thanksgiving with my sister and brother. Last Thursday, I was at the local independent drugstore in what passes for downtown. In my hometown it has a lunch counter like an old-fashioned drugstore. I got a cup of coffee and sat down at the counter drinking it when Sarah sat down beside me and said hello. She was super nervous and red in the face. I was shocked and just sat there looking at her. I was exploding inside, but I kept my cool outwardly. She was still beautiful. She was actually very fit herself and had lost her baby face and became maybe even more beautiful. She started off by apologizing for the way she ended our marriage. I told her she already apologized like 100 times when she dumped me, but she insisted that she was young and stupid. And over time she realized how much she had hurt me. She wanted to meet me later in a less crowded spot with fewer spies. Small town, remember? I shook my head no and told her frankly that I didn't see what I could possibly get out of meeting with her again. That kind of took the wind out of her sails. And she kind of deflated. She admitted that it was probably more for her than for me. She said that I'd get closure not only for how she ended things but for the kind of person she was back then. She wanted to tell me about how she'd changed and what she'd learned about herself and what real love is. She wanted me to see that the person she became is someone that I could respect and maybe be friends with again. I wanted to get the hell out of there, so I just told her I'd think about it. She gave me her number, and I went home. Apparently, my mother and sister had already heard about it from Sarah's mom, so I'm a big dumb victim of some kind of big dumb Hallmark Christmas movie hit job. My sister 29F and mom 55F told me that they kept up with Sarah since our divorce and they know that she's changed and that I should hear her out. My dad 56M just shook his head and walked off. My brother 22M thought all of this was hilarious. I asked if he wanted to chime in, and he just shrugged his shoulders and said that since Sarah and I knew each other from when we were kids, I should at least hear her out just to keep the peace between our families since we live in a small town. Personally, I do think that her family would feel insulted if I didn't at least talk with her. I know for a fact that she's living with her parents now, so it seems like her life completely SHT the bed. I'd kind of like to get the gory details as maybe a form of schadenfreude, but it's all behind me now, and I think it would all just make me sad. I guess I'm a better man now that I'm more mature, more wealthy, and fitter than I was when I was with her, but I'm still the same guy that she didn't have chemistry or connection with back in the day. So I think whatever comes out of her mouth would be bullshit. I think she's probably a dragon cosplaying as a princess and wants me to be her white knight. Fuck that. My mom and sister are pushing hard for me to meet her, and my mom says that she's afraid if I don't at least hear Sarah out, that Sarah's mom will resent her and make her social life more complicated. Let me make it clear that I have no intention of getting back with Sarah. Sarah is very beautiful, but so are the women of Romania, Iceland, and elsewhere, and they have the added bonus of not breaking my heart. I'm interested in going just to hear about what happened to her after she dumped me and to smooth things over for my folks. What do you think, Reddit? Should I go? I kind of want to talk me down off the ledge. Would I be the asshole if I ghosted my ex-wife? Stories number 12. Can't I just order food in peace? I ordered DoorDash for lunch, something I do every now and again but not a lot because it gets expensive. Anyway, my food arrives and one of my coworkers asked what I ordered when I told her. What if we were hungry? Talking about her and my other coworker. Then you can order food. You're adults with smartphones, cars, etc. You're perfectly capable of ordering food just as I am. A while back, this was happening nearly every time I ordered DoorDash. My coworker had to say something about me not asking if they wanted anything. It had stopped for a while, but I guess she's back on it again. I don't bother her with anything that isn't directly work related, yet she tries to orchestrate me down to how I have the blinds in my window by my desk. I can't order my own food in peace. And to make matters worse, they both agreed to a Christmas gift for the boss that totals a contribution of $35 from each of us. I've only given $10, so my other coworker, seeing as I spent money on food, said, "I'd like the rest of the money when you get a chance." Bullshit. The fact that I, not only, was griped at for not also putting in a food order for them but immediately put on the spot because I spent money I worked for, on myself instead of contributing to our boss's Christmas gift. Something is very wrong with this picture. Stories number 13. Am I overreacting? Packed in-laws stuff while they were shopping, put it outside on our porch, and told my wife them or me. My wife and I have 2 kids, a 3-year-old girl and newborn son. My wife's parents have been here helping since the baby was born about 2 months ago. Having in-laws over this long is cultural, and while we both come from the same background/country, China, I am more Americanized and don't really want overbearing family members over for so long. I should start off by saying I'm not a fan of my in-laws from the get-go. Their relationship with my wife is complicated at best. Her dad was physically and of course verbally/emotionally abusive. And her mom kept her in the situation and would leave her along with the abuser for months at a time while she traveled for work. My wife has completely written off her father and sees him as a package deal. She has a complicated relationship with her mother where they argue constantly, but she feels she needs her. My FIL keeps to himself mostly at this point. MIL drives me absolutely insane. The first thing she does when she gets to our home is goes through the pantry and starts complaining about what we buy. She constantly nags my wife about everything from the way she washes vegetables, to the way she cooks, to the way she does laundry, etc. She has told me I shouldn't be allowed to touch the kids' clothes because I don't wash it properly, throwing it in the washer with detergent, then drying it. She's constantly getting upset over dumb shit like she will tell my wife we have to wash our daughter's hair every single day. Pediatrician advised against this. She will constantly tell us our kids are cold. Our daughter, who can talk, will refute this, saying she's not cold, and MIL will just say kids are stubborn and don't know better. The cold thing is the main cause for the post title. We live in a climate where it could be 20 or 60 on a given winter day. It's been closer to 60 lately. MIL is always talking about how we need to put thicker jackets onto our daughter when we go out. She gets extremely upset if we don't follow her advice and holes up in her room or avoids contact with everyone when we don't follow her advice. This is fine with me but bothers my wife a lot. Recently our child got a cold, along with many other kids in her preschool class. And my MIL has been relentless with the "keep daughter warm" bullshit to the point she straight up lies and tells my wife that I took her out in a t-shirt into 40-degree weather while I wore a thick jacket. When I confronted her about this, she said it was an exaggeration of what she said. Usually it's me who gets my daughter out of bed in the morning, but she's been sleeping a bit later due to being sick lately. This time MIL went to get her, and I could hear them through the baby monitor. She was saying, "I'm sorry little girl, I'm sorry your dad is too stupid to help you when you're sick. Don't worry, it'll be okay. We're here to help because your dad is too stupid to take care of you. Your dad doesn't care about you, but your grandfather and grandmother do, so you will be okay." My daughter can understand some stuff, but she's not complex enough in language yet. Still, I think she can understand the general sentiment behind what was said here. I waited until they went to the grocery store later, went in their room, threw all their shit into a bag without much care, pulled the sheets and duvet to wash, set it on the porch where it's snowing, and dead-bolted the door with directions to the airport printed out and a list of flights they can take back to their home tucked into MIL's backpack. It's only me home and I refuse to let them back inside, or speak with them. They called my wife, who is mostly on my side but telling me we need the help and can't just force them away yet. After talking with my wife, I basically went outside and told them that unless she apologizes to me personally, And explains to our daughter that what she said was wrong, and starts living by our rules. She will not be allowed back inside or to see her grandkids again until all of the above happened. She not only refused to apologize but straight up denied saying anything and even had the gall to say, "Only you would say something like that by the monitor so everyone can hear you. Maybe you are feeling insecure and want to kick me out to feel big." My wife believes me, but thinks I'm basically ruining her relationship with her parents forever. I think they did that on their own over the years and this is just them flaunting it. Am I overreacting on this? Stories number 14. So I just spent like 4 years thinking a pair of best friends were in a gay relationship. Update. First, I am still at work but am on break, so I figured I would update hella quick. Second, thank you everyone for reassuring me I wasn't absolutely batshit crazy. Very kind messages in the DMs were super sweet. I know this didn't gain a lot of attention but people said they were invested. Jason immediately pulled me aside before we started our shift and I tried to apologize because I felt bad that I assumed that I didn't mean to cause offense or problems. Another reason he cut me off and said not to apologize. He rubbed the back of his neck and asked me how many other of our friends thought they were dating. I didn't want to pour gas on what felt like a fire but he pressed, so I honestly told him, everyone. He looked shocked and asked why I listed all of the reasons from my last post and a few more that I had thought about. He put his head in his hands and mumbled something I didn't catch and asked if everyone was okay with it. I told him, if anyone wasn't they would have said something by now and I would be in jail, but the body wouldn't be found. He asked why we didn't say anything sooner and I shrugged and said, it didn't matter, they were and always would be. Keith and Jason being gay or straight or purple wouldn't change any of that. They are good people, that's what matters. Jason admitted he really likes Keith but they aren't dating. When I asked why, he said, Keith doesn't like me like that. I asked him if he really thought that they bought a freaking house together. Keith always gets him these wild and amazing gifts. Gets him his favorite iced coffee and learned how to make spaghetti from scratch for him when his grandma passed because she was crazy authentic Italian. It's not like that. He looked sad. People. I need to talk to Keith. Stories number 15. I'm overthinking having found my dad's lube in my bathroom, and I'm extremely uncomfortable. Trigger warning for brief mentions of s/a no details. For backstory, I'm 16. My dad was married to a girl, my stepmom, from around ages 11 to 16. She had a son who was the same age as me who would often s/a me. This went on for about 2 to 3 years. My dad and stepmom knew and allowed it to happen since he's just a boy. I ran away at 14 to live with my grandma and have been with her ever since. Yes, CPS was contacted on multiple occasions but never did anything since they didn't have enough proof. In probably July, my dad and stepmom got a divorce. She was just using him for his money. Shocker, my grandma allowed him to move in with us for a bit afterwards. We shared a bathroom and one morning when I got up, I found his lube on the top of the toilet next to the shower. I was in complete shock and utterly disgusted. I told my grandma and she brushed it off until I broke down in tears begging her to tell him not to leave that shit in my bathroom. I've developed CPSTD due to the s/a I used to go through and it really got me thinking. I posted about it in a group on Facebook and I had so many comments saying that it was extremely weird and a few people even said something along the lines of, he probably purposely left that in your bathroom if he allowed you to be s/ed for years. He probably has some sick thoughts about it. This happened months ago and I still think about it every day. Am I overthinking it? Or is this actually concerning? ETA, he's since moved out. He was only here for about 3 months. Edit 2, please stop DMing me to ask questions or ask me to describe my assault. If you have a question, ask it in the comments. I will not tell you about my s/a and you DMing me to ask about it is incredibly weird. Edit 3, yes, I know people masturbate and that in and of itself isn't triggering for me, but seriously, what man uses lube to just jack off? If he had a toy, why did he remember to put the toy away but not the lube? It's all really weird to me. For the people asking, the brand was Wicked Sensual Care. Yes, there is a possibility he was using it for constipation or something. However, I'm not sure that's the case because my grandma talked to him about it and she told me he got extremely embarrassed, put it away, and then ended up leaving to stay at his house for the night. The only reason I'm reading into this is because he felicitated in my abuse for years. Stories number 16. Am I the asshole here for telling my girlfriend I can't trust her anymore when it comes to her wanting a baby? I 28M have been dating my girlfriend 26F for 4 years. She has told me she always wanted children. We just didn't actively try for one, though I never pressured her into having a baby. it was more so her idea. I make enough and we own a home, so having a baby is something we can do. So, to clarify, I'm not mad at her for this. I'm extremely concerned and I feel like everything she has said about her wanting a baby was a lie. Abortion is also legal up to 21 weeks of pregnancy in our state. So she told me she was pregnant, she was having symptoms and took a test. She was happy about it and excited. I was happy as well and offered to make an appointment for her. We both went together and she was 6 weeks pregnant. We have been planning. She even told her friends and family. She ended up having a miscarriage at around 9 weeks. It was sudden and she was upset and I comforted her about it. It seemed very tough for her, so I did my best to try and make her feel better. I had to retrieve something from a drawer in our bedroom and I found some herbs covered under a bag. It was pennyroyal and mugwort. I was confused because I have heard of pennyroyal being used to cause self-abortions. I asked her about it and she immediately became defensive and told me that she didn't know where it came from. I kept trying to ask her about it and she ended up telling me she used it to have a miscarriage. She was crying and I was just in shock. I asked her why. I told her she didn't have to lie to me about it and I'm confused because she was the one who really wanted a baby. She didn't give me an answer about it. I told her that we need to go to the hospital to make sure she isn't hurt, since pennyroyal is toxic, but she kept declining. It's been a few days and she seems fine. I've been trying to ask her about this, but she just says she doesn't want to talk about it apparently. She was telling her friends and family she had a miscarriage and has been accepting condolences. She's avoiding this, but I don't want to push it towards her anymore. I'm not too sure what to do about this because I'm worried she might be having some type of mental breakdown or something. I eventually told her that she should not tell me about having a baby again, and I can't trust her about it anymore. She was upset hearing that, but what else could I say about something like this? This might make me a huge asshole, but in the back of my mind has been thinking she might have did this for attention from her friends and family. What to do, and I feel like a horrible person for even thinking this stuff. Edit, I'm thankful for all the info on the herbs and all of the advice. I can't comment for a few hours because I'm going to not be on Reddit, but I am going to talk to her tonight, and tomorrow or whenever everything has calmed down I will make an update. Firstly, for some context, we have a Planned Parenthood that specializes in abortions like 5 minutes away. I understand people thinking she didn't want to get an abortion because of protesters. I completely understand. I drive by that specific place every single day for work. I have seen no protesters. It's usually empty besides a few cars on the side of the road, but I still understand why she wouldn't want a medical abortion from reading the comments. I asked her why. What was her goal here? She was trying really hard to avoid the conversation and left the room. But I apologize if this makes me an asshole, but I told her if we can't have a conversation about this I have to end the relationship. She came back in and said the reason why she did this was because she never felt like her family gave her enough attention in life, and didn't feel supported by them, so she wanted to tell them she had a miscarriage so they can feel bad for her. I was confused because she could have just gotten a medical abortion and lied about it instead of just harming her body with a toxic herb. I asked her about that, and she told me she wanted to have the experience of having an actual miscarriage. I was so confused and in shock, so I didn't say much else because all of this just sounded crazy to me. She told me she didn't want me mad at her and she doesn't want to break up, and she was literally begging me to not break up with her. I asked her, is there any chance the baby wouldn't have been mine? She said no. I told her she needs to get therapy ASAP. I thankfully make enough to afford therapy, and I told her I will pay for her if she just please go to therapy. She agreed. I also told her she needs to go to the hospital, and I was telling her all of your comments about the septic that can happen and liver and kidney damage, and that kinda scared her into going to the hospital to get checked out. We went to the hospital last night and thankfully she is okay. Apparently she drank around 1 cup of it a day for a few days. I found out she was also taking some other things, high dose of vitamin C, turmeric, parsley. That's pretty much it for now. But I'm not too sure where to go from here. I love her and I do want to be with her, but all of this is so out of the blue. Thanks for all of the comments on the last post. If anything else happens I'll make another update. A lot has happened from my last post and now everything is calmer now. I'm hoping this will be my last update. Apologies since this is going to be long. In my last post I told her she needed to go to therapy ASAP, told her I will pay and everything. I just hoped for the love of fucking God for her to please go to therapy. That was the only thing I wanted. I haven't set up anything yet, because she told me she doesn't want to go to therapy now. She told me she will never do what she did again and doesn't believe she needs therapy. I was going back and forth with her on this, but she was very insistent on not wanting any therapy. I told her I can't move on in this relationship if she doesn't do therapy. She was arguing with me about it and told me if I loved her, I will stay in this relationship regardless, and it wasn't even that big of a deal. I was pretty pissed hearing that because not only did she purposely miscarry the baby we planned for, She harmed herself for no reason in her words, to experience a actual miscarriage, and I can't even trust her anymore. I was thinking about telling her parents at this point and I accidentally brought it up out of worry of her mental health / me being pissed off and she begged me, got on the ground, begged me to not tell her parents. I took her word. Because I didn't want her to lose her mind even more over this. I told her I absolutely have to leave this relationship. I told her it isn't my responsibility anymore because this has honestly been making me lose my mind too. I was holding it back but I can't really take it anymore. Also yesterday, before this fight, she publicly stated on Facebook that she had a miscarriage and was tore up about it, accepting condolences again in the comments. I brought that up to her, and she told me the same thing in my last post. She was pretty much just wanting to feel important to friends / family. She was so nonchalant about it and honestly seemed like she thought I'd think I wouldn't care. I told her to stop posting about it and to stop telling people. Back to when we were having the fight, I told her seriously I can't be with her anymore. I will allow you to stay here or you can go back to your parents. She was laying on the ground crying at this point. I had my phone ready because my gut feeling was telling me that she might do something to herself. She would come out of the room she was packing in and come close to me and hug me out of nowhere. She said that if I'm breaking up with her she wants a last final hug. The wildest thing is she came out of the room with one of my shirts on, a shirt she was not wearing before, take it off right in front of me. And tells me here's your shirt back. I don't know what she was trying to do. She finally ended up leaving and went to her parents. Right before she left she was crying and I think it started to hit her that I was actually being serious. She was messaging me and calling me constantly, ranging from her just fixing this together, saying she wants therapy now, and her saying she will never do what she did again. I've been ignoring all of it. I realize this is not my responsibility now, and her parents can take care of it. Like what my worry has been, apparently, she did try to harm herself. Her mom messaged me about it. She said that her daughter is at the hospital and I'm assuming now on a hold because she tried to kill herself. She is physically fine. That is the last of it, and I'm thinking this will be my last update. I am not going back to her, and I'm going to try and stop thinking about all of this and get a good lock for my door. Thanks for all of the advice on the last post. Edit, I am telling her parents now. If anything happens I will just update it here. Edit 2. I ended up telling her parents I had messages relating to this between me and her, took photos of the herbs she used, told them everything. Thankfully, they didn't accuse me or do anything drastic and thanked me for telling them. They said they will tell the hospital what I told them. Not too sure what's going on at the moment or what's going to happen after since she is being held right now. I will update this if anything else happens. Stories number 17. Am I the asshole here for canceling my parents' anniversary party after they uninvited my husband because he's a waiter? I 28F have been married to my husband 30M for 3 years. He's an amazing partner and works as a waiter at a high-end restaurant, which he loves. My parents have always been a bit snobby about his job, making comments like, when will he get a real career? A few months ago, my siblings and I planned a big surprise party for my parents' 30th anniversary. I was covering the majority of the costs because I'm in a better financial position. Invitations were sent, catering was booked, and everything was set. Last week, my mom called me and said they were uncomfortable with my husband attending because some of their prestigious friends would be there, and they didn't want to be embarrassed by his job. I was stunned. I told her that was cruel and unacceptable, but she doubled down, saying, it's just one night, he should understand. I immediately canceled the entire party, letting my siblings know why. They're furious with our parents but think canceling was too extreme since the party wasn't just for them, it was for the whole family. My parents are devastated and calling me selfish, saying I ruined their milestone.